And thanks to Eisenhower and Brett and to the Jocelyn Center and Jack. It's my pleasure to be able to spend some time with you all on a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I think as Brett and Jack both said, there are lots of needs regarding stress in our lives in a really complicated world in which we find ourselves today. So my hope is to share some information with you, some personal, some evidence-based, that will give you an opportunity to consider the role of stress in your life, and then some tools to use to pick up along the way that I hope you will find helpful as you work toward optimizing your joy and well-being in each of your lives. I like for this to really be less formal. Certainly, if you have a burning question, you can just send that to Brett or jot a note down to yourself, because it's my belief that we learn from one another, and you all also have tools that you use to manage stress. And if there's something that you found to be helpful that I don't talk about, please know that as we have discussion at the end, it's a wonderful opportunity for us to all learn from one another. So without further ado, let's see if we can get rolling. I'm K Stewart. I'm a registered nurse and have been for, God, almost half a century. That's scary. I come to this work after a nursing career that allowed me to care for patients and staff across the continuum of care, from post-op hearts and ICUs to hospice and palliative care. My most of the last 30 years were spent at Eisenhower. And in my last position there, I was the director of the Ranker Wellness Center, which included our cardiac and pulmonary rehab programs and our heart failure clinic. And prior to that, I worked for over a decade as the director of what's usually known as nursing education. So I enjoy learning from and sharing with others as we all grow to be able to enjoy our lives more. About 25 years ago, I was a tele nurse, and I was a pretty burned out one. I loved my work, but that was pretty much who I was, my work. And so to this day, I believe that my body, I was paying no attention to. And so in an effort to finally stop me to pay attention and make me pay attention, I had an accident at home and I broke my foot and I couldn't work for about 8 weeks. And that hadn't happened to me since I was a teenager. So it was a very humbling experience. And during that time, one of the lessons I learned was how to ask for help, because I was really good at helping other people, but I wasn't good at all at asking for help for myself. So during that time, I picked up a lot of the tools that I'm going to share with you. They're evidence-based tools. There's science to support them. And I had the opportunity to work with a counselor who helped me sort through my life and make some better decisions, and also introduced me to the concept of meditation and what was at the time known as alternative medicine. It's now known as integrative medicine. And I actually worked in a cardiology practice in San Diego that had a both and philosophy in terms of managing the care of folks dealing with cardiovascular disease. So it's a little bit about me. I love this topic, but I also love hearing from people who are interested in it and have found other ways that help them. The wish list, you all have each given up an hour of your day in order for us to spend this time together. So if there's something that you'd really like to be sure we talk about, or is a burning desire for you, if you would just put it in the chat so Brett can share it, I'd really appreciate it. Because I want this to be meaningful. And if we have any of those things, we can circle back at the end to make sure that we discussed if there was something you wanted to be part of our program. Does anybody have anything that they want to be sure we talk about?
I think you're good to go.
All righty. Thanks, Brett. So what we're going to talk about today, obviously stress, but we're going to define it. And we're going to really focus on the importance of perception when we talk about stress management. We're going to discuss in some detail the pathophysiology of stress. It's real. It's not, it may start in our heads, but it's very real what happens in our bodies. Then the importance of learning to respond versus reacting. We'll discuss towards the end the pillars, the 4 pillars that many believe make up a balanced life with joy and well-being. And we'll talk about tools to use, including resources at the end that I found helpful. And I'm happy to hear other tools that some of you may have found and resources as we navigate our world today. So, oh my gosh, isn't she frightening? About 30 years ago in a magazine I rarely picked up, there was an entire section on stress. And I have used this for decades. To me, the Sultana, epitomizes what stress looks like when we are stressed out. And you can see as you look at the screen, she says, "Who's stressed? I feel very relaxed." And you can almost feel every nerve ending in her body is like this in a fist. So what are some of the things that she's experiencing? Well, she's having migraines, anxiety disorders. Her hands are like ice. She can't sleep. Her hair's falling out in clumps. Her skin, she's got hives and eczema and other rashes. Lower extremities feel like ice. Her GI system, she either can't go or she can't not go. Her heart and cardiovascular system, she's got high blood pressure. She feels like her heart's going to jump out of her chest some days. And when you mention her libido, she says, "You have got to be kidding." That's like way down my list. And then her joints and muscles are tense and tight and just hurt. And so that's in a nutshell how stress can impact every system in our bodies. So it's real. So what do we do? And by the way, what is it? There are a lot of definitions. The one that I use the most is this one. And William White was an organizational psychologist, and he defines it as the perceived demand for change. So let's take that apart a little. Change is part of life, right? I mean, we are responding to the need to change all day, every day. The key word there to me is perceived. The perception to need to change. So that doesn't have to be real. I'm of a generation that I remember the series Lost in Space. Some of you may remember Lost in Space. And the little robot would say to Will, he would say, the little boy's name was Will Robinson, and he would say, "Will Robinson, danger, danger, danger." And when our brains are getting that message, then it tells the body what to do, and the body follows that message. So we're going to talk about what that is. What is that cascade of events that begins? And then I hope demonstrate that by learning to balance that cascade of chemicals that take place, we're able to, by bringing better balance, we can at least minimize some of the changes that take place with when there is a lot of wear and tear on our bodies as we age, not because of aging specifically, but simply because of what this chronically can do to us, and also how chronic conditions also lead to chronic stress. So the key for you from this slide is the body does what the brain tells it to do, and the brain will respond or react to perceived needs. It doesn't have to be real. So this slide I use from a book on your resources. John Kabat-Zinn, Joan Borysenko, and Herbert Benson did a lot of research back at Harvard in the 70s on mindfulness and mind-body connection. And this is from his book, is taken from his book called Full Catastrophe Living, which is a text for mindfulness. And I think it beautifully illustrates what this is all about. So some event that's perceived as a need for change, it may be real or not, comes into our awareness. And when you look down the left side of the screen, you see that it impacts pretty much the major systems in our body: the musculoskeletal system, the cardiovascular system, the nervous system, and long-term, our immune system. It's what activates the flight or fight response. And that is adrenaline secreted by the adrenal glands. And that's our acute stress chemical. What does adrenaline do? Well, in taking care of heart disease, and if someone's having an acute cardiac event, we may actually give them adrenaline because it makes things tight, but it also helps the heart to pump. So it is an arousal chemical. And to me, the easiest way to think about adrenaline is it causes things to tighten. So what does that mean? That means that my blood pressure goes up, my heart rate goes up. Sometimes that means that not only is my heart rate up, but it's skipping beats, feels like it's going to jump out of my chest, irregular beats called arrhythmias. It may also probably has raised my respiratory rate. I'm breathing a little bit faster. It really can affect sleep, can cause headaches, backaches, and it causes anxiety because all this stuff is running around in our bodies. And again, this is happening, this reaction happens because the brain thinks danger, whether it's real or not. So over time, what happens is if this is a more chronic situation, then I start to develop behaviors that don't serve me well. And some of those can be overworking. I did that 30 years ago, worked all the time. That was a problem. It wasn't a good thing. Some people overeat. Some people can't sit still. That was me. I could not sit still. That can lead further then into substance abuse problems or other types of compulsive behaviors. So it may be someone used to enjoy a glass of wine with dinner. Well, now they're having 2 glasses every night. Maybe they are, I was guilty of this. I had way too much caffeine on board. Coffee. Or they may just overeat. And sometimes when you look at what you're overeating when you're stressed, your body may actually have a reason for that. So comfort foods, carbs, chocolates, those foods actually can stimulate the production of serotonin and dopamine, which are neurotransmitters that help us feel better. So, our bodies are so miraculous. We just often forget to listen to them. And when we want to choose to move from reacting to responding, now's the time when we're able to make choices. So responding, for the purpose of this discussion, is actually about learning to be mindful. And it's just learning. We learn other things. This is another thing, but it really can change our lives. So what is mindfulness? You hear a lot about it. Mindfulness is no more than being present in the moment. When all these things on the left-hand side are going on, how present do you think we are? Not very. We're just pinging. We're pinging off this. We're yelling at somebody on the phone. We're talking angrily to somebody else. We are, if not literally inside, we can feel like we are just screaming. That's not a place where we make real good decisions. So being mindful is a skill that helps us to focus on what's going on right now in this present moment. And it also, as a rule, helps us to calm down. And when we start to calm down, then the brain is also changing. That chemistry is changing. And as we are calmer, we now are able to actually respond with decisions versus reacting. And that starts its own cascade of events, which typically is much, much more advantageous for us than being in this reactionary pinging mode all the time. And I can't see all of you. I can see some of you. Is that making sense? Does that make sense? Okay. So thank you. So let's take a look. And I love the peaceful. I live at the beach now, and I love this. But it is it's really a powerful statement. It isn't stress that kills us, although people die of stress every day. It's our reaction to it. And I would suggest it is the reaction versus the response that can kill us. So let's figure out, what do we do? Each of us have signals that our bodies give us when we are in a more hyper aroused or hyper alert state. Our brains canvass every moment. Am I safe? Am I safe? Am I safe? It's the old brain. It's the primitive brain. And it doesn't matter whether the danger is real or not. It still is there. So, for example, before we started this with the, I was having trouble with the screen here. All right, my brain was saying, oh, this could be a problem for you. Yellow, yellow, yellow. What if you don't get it right? Blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? It's then that you say, hold on, nothing bad's happening here. It's a glitch with technology. So what? Take a deep breath, figure it out, and let's get it fixed. And you pull on your resources, Brett, to help me fix it. So they're little things that happen all day, every day, because our brains are always on guard to keep us safe. So what are some of the signs? Shoulder, neck tightness. I mentioned when I was a stressed out tele nurse and finally had to stop. But my shoulder, my right shoulder, was so tight. If I had a massage, they wanted to know, did they lay brick on your shoulders? Because that's what they feel like. I was totally out of touch with it. So that's one of my signals. I had to learn that. Some people grind their teeth. Others get headaches. Some people have indigestion. Well, why might that be? Think about that. If everything's sitting like this, what might happen? We're probably secreting more acid in our stomach also. And then we start to feel it sort of turning, in our esophagus. And sleep, having trouble sleeping is a big one. So see if this is not a comprehensive list. It's an example of lists. And you can, I want to invite you though, to think as we go through a variety of different ways that it shows up, to think about how does this work for me? And you may not know, and that's okay, but that's where mindfulness will help you, because it will help you to slow down, helps all of us to slow down, so we can pay attention to what is actually happening and what are our bodies telling us. Behaviorally, I mentioned with the reactionary behaviors, this is compulsive eating, it's compulsive anything. It can be compulsive exercise. If you are exercising 2 and 3 hours a day and you're having a tough day at work and that's the way you relieve it, it may be okay, but you need to realize it's a signal of your stress level. Bossiness. Now, old nurse here. So nurses like to control things. And part of that, taking control in some respects, helps me feel on top of things, helps anybody feel on top of things. I'm not powerless. But if it's all about me saying, you do this, why are you doing that in somebody else's business, then that's bossiness. And that's an example of a behavior that may indicate my stress levels up. And as we mentioned earlier, overuse of substances. And only we know whether we are using a substance to medicate our stress. So those are some behavioral things. Emotionally, outburst, sarcasm. Sarcasm is a form of anger. So sarcasm, the worriers. Oh my goodness, worry, wringing of hands. Does most of what we worry about ever happen? No. But the brain, that thought's there, so the brain starts the whole cascade to be prepared for danger. Another one here that I think is really important is to recognize when we are in a place that we feel powerless to do anything, when we're overwhelmed to the point that, pull up the covers, close the blinds, and wake me up when it's over. It probably eventually will be over, but that's a really tough spot. At least if I'm angry and anxious, I've got some energy going. I can do something with some energy, but the bottom one, feeling powerless, that doesn't matter. I'm just, there's nothing I can do. Woe is me. That's actually, for many, is tougher because there's so little available energy to make change. Does that make sense? Okay. Psychologically, so we look at behaviors and feelings. It may also show up as being forgetful, not remembering stuff. Gee, where did I put that? Or making, maybe you make a date to meet a friend for a cup of coffee and they don't show. And they got a whole lot going on. And you send them a text and say, where are you? I'm here. And they say, what are you talking about? And that's when it may be helpful to think, okay, what's going on with them? Because our brain chemistries change, I hope, as I've shown you, when we are stressed. And so if we're in a high arousal state, we never stored in the brain's file cabinet that we were supposed to have coffee today. And I was going to put it in my phone later, so that didn't happen. So it actually just being forgetful. It can also paralyze us. so that we can't make decisions. We start 5 different things and we don't finish any of them, which leads to more anxiety or even just trouble thinking clearly because there's so much running around in our heads. Feeling overwhelmed. So that is often due to this cascade that's going on. And when we move from an acute stressor, an event, to my life is filled with it, we move from not only having adrenaline on board, but cortisol, our natural cortisone, is the one of the main chemicals that we see with chronic stress. And that can help's not the right word, that can cause a suppression in our immune system. People get sick. And often it can be traced back to chronic stress. The final one is more about depression, but just feeling sad and thinking to yourself, there's no real reason for that. But then it's a good time to practice some mindfulness and see what's really going on in your life. And chances are there's a lot of change going on. And it may not be bad. Change doesn't have to be bad. Wedding, graduation, babies, all those things, they're wonderful, but they're also stressful. Change, change, change. So just being aware. Before we move on to tools, though, I would really invite you to take a couple of minutes, not literally, but a few seconds, I guess, to think in terms of what might my signals be? And maybe you're in a good place right now. Maybe there really isn't a lot of stress going on. But if you think back to a time when there was, and I have to believe that we all have times when there is, think about those signals. What were your body's signals? How was your body talking to you to get your attention, to pay attention in order to affect response that can lead to change? So, what are some of our tools? Take care of yourself, nourish yourself, spend time with people who make you smile. You know who those folks are. Be sure you carve out time for them. There are also the folks that we all love, care for, but they can suck the life out of you. And doesn't make them a bad person, doesn't mean we don't love them and want them in our lives. But it does mean, particularly if I'm having a more stressful time, I might not spend as much time. And that's about taking care of myself. Have boundaries around things. See someone, but see them for a half hour, not for 2 hours of listening to everything that has ever been wrong. So take care of yourself, nourish yourself by spending time with those who nourish you. And that helps us to become a person that we also enjoy spending time with. I once read a book, The Untethered Soul. And I don't remember a whole lot about the book except this, and it has stuck with me. I'm a person who has that little voice that goes in my head a lot if I'm being stressed. Why'd you do that? Why'd you say that? What are you going to do that for? Well, that was stupid. Why in the world would you want to do that? That is not helpful. And yet, when we allow that to go on, it's basically allowing a negative person to live in your head. And what this example that the book gave was, take them out of your head and sit them in the chair next to you. And now decide, how much time do you actually want to spend with that person? And usually it's little to none. So be aware, because that chatter, the chatter is real, but it's also starting a real cascade of events in your head, anxiety, those kinds of things. And mindfulness can help you calm the chatter. And over time, it gets to be very, very minimal. And that helps to create more balance, the ability to respond versus reacting to the yeah that runs around, for those of you that have a chatter that lives in your head sometimes. Try to improve your interactions with others. And sometimes that means asking them. We all know when we say something or do something, what our intention is. And what I would like to suggest to you is, unless we ask, none of us know what it's like to be on the receiving end. Because we all live and see the world through our own filters. There are things I see about this world that if I talk to any of you, you would see it differently, just simply because you have different life experience. So in an effort to improve interactions with others, if you think that might be helpful, ask them. If you say something or do something and you get a response, it's like, whoa, where did that come from? You might just ask. Or if it's not the right time for it, later circle back and ask. I'm not sure I came across like I intended. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that was like for you? I don't think it came across like I hoped. Exercise is a fabulous, fabulous tool to help manage stress. It is, if you can walk 30 minutes a day, that can change your life. Now, a lot of people can't do that. So one form of exercise, let's say you're more homebound and have limited mobility, but chair yoga is wonderful. And there are apps or YouTube just for chair yoga. And one of the best things about chair yoga is it helps to optimize the flexibility in our spine. I had a yoga teacher say once, a flexible spine is the key to longevity. Now, I don't know that that's true, but what's important is flexibility in our spines do help us. Now, a lot of people don't have much flexibility, but do what you can with what you have, and then congratulate yourself for making a change to make things better. Sleep. I used to hear when I was younger, oh, when people get older, they don't need sleep so much. So as long as they're, getting 6 hours or so, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Well, the evidence says that's not true. We all need 8 hours of sleep a night or more if we can get it. And notice that the slide says adequate restful sleep. So maybe you're in bed for 12 hours, but you're up every 2 hours. That is not restful sleep. And the first response is not to take a sleeping pill. Sometimes sleeping pills are needed, and that's a discussion to have with your healthcare provider, but it isn't the first choice. Unless there's something really acute going on, you're going to take it for a short period of time, and then that's going to be done. But figuring out what's going on with me that I'm not sleeping. What is it? Am I awake because I'm worried? That means that whole cascade of stress reactions going on all the time. Have I, in the last 6 months, decided I got a new TV and it's in my bedroom, and so I just sleep with it on? That means that you may be trying to go to sleep, but whatever's on that television, your brain is still processing. It's not sleeping. And if it's some crime story or even the news, which is worse than crime stories many days, your brain never slows down. And it would be odd to think that in that kind of a setting, you'd relax to go to sleep. So remember, the body will do what the mind is telling it. So we need to give the mind the message an hour or so before we go to sleep. You know what? Time to slow the day down, bring it to a close, and get ready to have a good night's sleep so I meet the day tomorrow prepared. So what can you do? Well, you can think about what are you doing for an hour or so before you go to sleep at night. That's the first thing, insight. Second, if you say, well, you know, I thought about it, but I don't really see anything, I don't know, then start to set a different stage. If you like to take baths, take a warm bath. If you can have a cup of chamomile tea, have a cup of tea. Read something light. I realized a couple of months ago, I was reading nonfiction that was not light before in bed at night and wondered why I wasn't going to sleep. So now I read maybe a little romantic novel or something light. It's not going to cause me to fret before I go to sleep. Have a quiet environment. And if you aren't asleep and you've been in bed, I saw a new study the other day. Now they're saying 30 minutes, get up. I was always under the 45 minutes to an hour, but get up, because what you want to do is condition the body that the bed is the place for sleep or relaxing activity. It is not the place to work on my laptop, to listen to TV, to talk on the phone with somebody who aggravates me, all that. You want the mind to give the body the message, this day is ending, and I'm going to sleep well tonight to be ready for tomorrow. Years ago, I started the practice of a gratitude journal. And I don't do it every night anymore, but I usually have pen and pad by my bed to write down 3 things I was grateful for that day. That's a nice way to think of ending the day. And it isn't like the sky is blue. It's things like, oh, wow, I was walking with Scamp down by the beach, and his joy at bubbles in the waves was just beyond joy. I'm so grateful I got to have that. So very specific things. And it is a good idea to keep a pad and pencil by the bed. And if you wake up during the night because you're thinking about, oh, I forgot to do this, or I need to do this, and I don't want to forget, just write it down. And then you can sort of wipe your hands and say, okay, I'll remember that in the morning because I wrote it down. It'll be right there. So those are just some ideas for sleep. There are whole specialties and books and all kinds of things on sleep. It's important. So if you're having challenges with it, reach out, either resources online or talk to somebody about it, and try to change the environment before you take yet another medication. Okay. That's my little guy, Scamp. So if you like dogs and you are of a mind to take on the care of and responsibility for one, consider getting one, because they need to walk. And if you're able to do that, that kind of hits two birds with one stone. And the evidence shows that petting a pet reduces our blood pressure and helps to calm our central nervous system. So there's good evidence for it, as long as you love dogs or cats. Make time in your day for things that are pleasant. Sounds like a no-brainer, but let me tell you, a lot of times we are nowhere near that. And it's old, but tried and true. If you need to, if you keep breaking the time for pleasant activities, put it in whatever way you keep up with your day, a calendar, your date book, however you do that. But it's as important as any appointment you make with a doctor or a therapy or whatever. Make time for it. It changes how we walk through the day. Develop your spirituality. Now, I didn't say you need to go to church or synagogue or go worship someplace. I said that's religion. Develop your spirituality. And spirituality is about our connection to something larger than us. When I lived in the desert, I could take a walk with a friend at the living desert. And to me, that was like going to church. It was just beautiful because that works for me. Doesn't mean it works for somebody else, but it's important to figure out what are you connected to that is larger than you. Maybe it's a group that's part of the power of 12-step programs. The group becomes very important and is a connection. And when we talk about resources, one of the resources that's on there is about the importance of connection. We are human beings. Many would say we are spiritual beings. And so that implies connection. We need connection. And during the times of COVID, a lot of the mental health, particularly with both ends of the age spectrum, was terribly impacted because of the isolation and the inability to have that touch connection with one another. So I invite you to really think about that. It's very important. Consider adding a mindfulness activity to your life. And some examples are Tai Chi, beautiful, graceful, fluid. Yoga, I'm a big yoga fan, and doesn't have to be long. And I do yoga with an online yoga instructor. It's free. It's at my house, you know. And you know, I don't get into the lotus position. It's sort of meet yourself where you are. And if getting down on a mat's not workable, do chair yoga. It's great. And meditation. And I am a firm believer in the power of meditation. There are different types of meditation. You can pick the form that does best for you. We're going to do a mindfulness activity. That's what works for me. But other people may guided imagery is a form of mindfulness, but it actually guides you along so that you're paying attention. John Kabat-Zinn, also on our resource list, author of Full Catastrophe Living, he defines meditation as the intention to pay attention. It's nothing more complicated than that. For the next few minutes, you set your timer or whatever. I'm going to pay attention to my breath. We're going to do that. Or I'm going to pay attention, and I do this a lot of mornings. I'm going to pay attention to this specific bird that is singing in my front yard. And what I've learned is I just think they're always singing. Well, no, there's actually a pattern to all that they're singing, but I only learned that because I was paying attention to it. So be light with it. But really, mindfulness is huge in terms of helping our brains calm down So we can move from reacting, which often gets us into trouble, to responding, which is, I'm in control of this. Or at least I'm in much more control than when I'm over here pinging off of everything, every stimulus that comes into my environment. So really think about that. Think about mindfulness. There are apps. Calm is a great app for sleep. It's a great app for meditations. I'm going to use an app that's on my MacBook to do to play as we do a mindfulness exercise. So just be curious. Look around, see what's out there. Chances are you're going to find things that are perfect for you. And I didn't include them because I'm not aware of them, which is why it's nice when we learn from each other. So the pillars of well-being, those are, and these are multiple authors talking about the four corners, basically, of well-being, which is optimizing our lives for joy. Nutrition, I cannot stress to you enough the importance of nutrition. We live in a fast food world, and those are processed foods, and they're full of stuff that aren't good for us. So try as much as you can, if you choose to work on nutrition, try to eat fresh food that you recognize it as a carrot or as a potato. Plant-based is evidence is growing. Plant-based is best. That doesn't mean you need to be a vegetarian. It means that when we plan our meals, we plan around including fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, and not how big is the steak going to be, which is, in my growing up, that was how the meal was planned, around whatever animal protein we were having today, because we had to have some at every meal. Well, the evidence shows that that was okay then, but it's not what in today's world works the best. So consider that. At the Renker Wellness Center in our cardiac rehab program for the last several years, we have a comprehensive cardiac rehab program that includes the Pritikin program. Everybody thinks about Pritikin in the diet, and that's true. That is true. But it's also about stress management, spirituality, exercise, connection, group support. It's about a lot of things. So think about nutrition, and does this look like a food, or is this something that I got at the window when I drove through for 5 minutes? Regular exercise, please find something that you can enjoy doing. Don't choose it because your neighbor wants to do it or your spouse wants to do it and you don't. Then it becomes one more thing to do and drudgery. Find something that makes your heart sing. And if you don't know, try several things. Try them for a while and say, you know what? I tried Tai Chi. I don't like it. My balance is off, or it's this, or it's that. Well, that's okay. I want to swim. Then swim, ride a bike, walk, whatever, but regular exercise. That also, the movement of exercise helps to move this churn that we get going with this adrenaline and all these stress hormones on board. It helps, it gives them a place to go other than out our mouths when we yell at somebody. Manage stress. And hopefully I've been able to offer up some tools that you may find helpful, and to define stress, because it's not bad. It is, in a way that is helpful to you, because it's about change and perception. And then finally, I spent a lot of time talking about sleep. Sleep is a pillar of well-being. So as you look, if you think, oh my goodness, do I need to change everything? No, please don't. pick one thing. Maybe pick one pillar. Let's say you decide, I really eat pretty well and I sleep at night, but I've got this thing going on and I think I want to work on my stress. Okay. So work on your stress. And chances are, as you work on your stress, if your diet slipped a little, it gets back into balance because these things are all interconnected. So let's take a few minutes and two, as a matter of fact, and I would like to invite you to practice a mindfulness meditation. And with that, if you will sit comfortably in your chair, and I'll start you and stop you. All you have to do is just be present. Sit in your chair, feet on the ground. Mother Earth is there. Touching thumb and forefinger helps to stimulate alpha brain waves of relaxation if you'd like to gently do that. How was that though? Just to be still for a couple of minutes. Well, I hope it was pleasant. Let's go through some of the resources. And the first is the little book, and you'll see it was published almost 40 years ago, but it's the book that taught me how to meditate. It's a little paperback by Joan Borysenko, called Minding the Body, Mending the Mind. And I couldn't sit still for more than 2 minutes. But over months, I learned to sit still. And I also learned that I didn't have to have a good meditation. I simply needed to make sure I took the time. And taking the time, even on days that were frustrating, built the discipline for the practice. And to me, meditation will change your life. So I invite you to stick with it. Sometimes I fall away from it. I've been doing it for a very long time. But when I do, it's usually because I'm not using my stress management tools. So I need to pick them up again. And I find that it very quickly goes back because my mind wants to be in a quiet, peaceful place. And it is that place where that quiet voice that lives in all of us can speak and we can hear it. We can't hear it when all the chatter's going on. We must be still. So I mentioned earlier, Jon Kabat-Zinn's Full Catastrophe Living. It's a textbook on mindfulness. It's in paperback. It's been out for forever. It's a classic. Dean Ornish is cardiologist, internist, who really has done amazing work on cardiovascular disease management. But this book in particular, he wrote some years ago on love and survival. And it's about the importance of connection. We as human beings need connection. Diana Schwartzbein's an endocrinologist in Santa Barbara. Her principle was her program, but it had to do a lot with stress and pillars. She did a lot of work with diabetes and also with insulin resistance due to adrenal gland burnout, due to too much stress. The Mayo Clinic Handbook for Happiness. Lucky me, I had a lovely lady when I was with the cardiac rehab program. She had been to Mayo and she brought back this handbook and shared a copy with me. It's just a light read that will lift your heart. It's paperback. And then the Pritikin Edge is the basics of the Pritikin program, which we offer at Eisenhower in our cardiac rehab series. So not a huge list. They're topics that I have found helpful. And I believe we've got a couple of minutes left. Comments that people may have to share.